Big us, everyone. Welcome
Os.
back to the Kyokushin Shuffle. Thanks so much for everyone's support. I always sincerely appreciate it, as does Shihan Sean here. And we are here for our series, the Japan Chronicles. Shihan Sean, how are you? You've been away for a bit. You've flown back and forth. Where do we find you? You're back in Japan.
Yeah, no, I'm back in Japan, and hay fever has hit. It's spring here. Yeah, beautiful time of the year. All the cherry blossoms are out. Everyone's going to parks, getting wasted, and
cool.
having a party. And
Fun
the masks are finally not sort of being pushed as heavily as they were before, so a bit of normality.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, just recently got back from a trip to New Zealand. I was there over there with my university work, but managed to catch up with the Kyokushin family over there, which was good. Got in a couple of sessions. Good to see everyone progressing, and it's been 2 years since I've been back.
Oh wow!
So I was there on sabbatical, but yeah, no, it was great to see some shiny new black belts there, and some Q grades with new colors wrapped around their waists and eager to go. So it was just nice to reconnect and catch up with some of the upper crust, as well as the boys that get out on the floor and sweat, and like we all do. So it was good.
Sounds good. Very good. And I'm sure you've been very busy. So we appreciate your time as always. And let's get a little bit stuck into it here, team, because we have been very, very good in our time limits with both of us. We do have a little bit extra for this one. But that being said, we Shihan Sean and I have our weekly briefing, and the picture behind you, Shihan Sean, as I gesture it respectfully, here even in Australia, the wise men, I call it. So we have a really exciting episode here where we are fortunate again with you being on the deck there and being very familiar with almost all of them. We look forward to listening to this one. So the news had come out last week, a post from Soshi Hasegawa, and I said to Shihan Sean, I'll let the floor be yours. He's done his research and time spent here, so we look forward to listening in to what's ahead for this episode. Shihan, the floor is yours.
Oh, thanks, Sensei. Yeah, no, it was interesting to sort of see that message come out. There's a few posts going around talking about the wise man. Yeah, if we had the Godfather music playing in the background, that might be good, but
exactly.
Don't want to get too much people into too much trouble. But the post basically went that the Shibuchokai, which is a group of the original branch chiefs.
Yes.
And if people know their history about what happened after Sosai passed away, there were different splits. There was a main split from Matsui that was originally all the old branch chiefs getting together saying, well, we don't want to go that way. Do. And that's how the IK2s and 3s and that originally started. There was a lot of good intention. People getting together saying, well, we don't want to stay there. We don't recognize that decision. What are we going to do?
Yep.
Then from there, you had your splits. You have your, different ICO. I don't know how many numbers there are now.
Yes.
And Hasegawa, Shihan, as he was known back then, now Soshi, he and Oishi Shihan, or is now Hanshi, and sometimes it's hard to keep up with all these titles, but they got together with some of those original branch chiefs and created what was called the Union. And we were involved in that together for a number of years. Since then, it went then to So Kyokushin, which so Hasegawa and Hasegawa Soshi. I have to keep remembering to put the title on it.
All good.
And Oishi Hanshi then formed So Kyokushin, and Nengokai, the Union, stayed as it was. And they just had a difference in vision, really, for a little while. And it wasn't any sort of big major blow up or anything. They just said, look, we're going this way, you're going that way. They didn't try to sort of crush each other or badmouth each other. It was all very, respectfully done.
Yeah.
Hasegawa Soshi stayed in So Kyokushin for a number of years, and that now has, departed from that relationship. So again, if you want to put numbers on it, you can go from 1 to 1,000. But as Hasegawa Soshi, gets on and reflects, and he's a person that reflects a lot. He really wanted to make a statement in terms of how do we protect Sensei's legacy. You know, it's been close on 30 odd years since Sensei passed away.
Mm.
Sensei had created Kyokushin and run it for 30 years. So you can see these different chunks of time.
Mm.
And he said, well, you know, how can we play nicely in the same, and
Yeah.
I hate you, well, I use this expression a lot,
The sandpit.
play
Yeah.
in the same sandpit, you
Yeah.
know, and have, you know,
Yeah.
a time where we all meet in the middle and, you know, can sort of do things that benefit each other mutually, you know. So they restarted this old branch chiefs group, recognizing that they all had their different factions.
Yeah.
But they said, okay, well, let's just sit down and actually talk about how we can start working together for the good of Kyokushin as one.
Yeah.
Not bringing it back into one organization,
Yeah.
because, you know, 30 years, close to 30 years on, that's a very hard thing to do.
Mm.
So they were very realistic in the way they approached it. And they said, okay, well, what needs to be done for the good of Kyokushin in Japan?
Yeah.
It's been watered down, you know, and overseas, you can go to some countries, and Hasegawa Soshi mentioned this in their press conference that they had, and I'll get to that in a moment, where he said you can go to some countries and there's 20 different factions now. And he said, we can't sort of criticize, I would say, the overseas Kyokushin for what they're doing, because the same thing's happening in Japan.
Mm.
So what do we do to restore a bit of order, and, you know, do something good for the further development and spread of Kyokushin within Japan? So that was the premise, or the sort of objective behind reinstigating talks. They all got together. They said, well, what can we do? And one of the channels for that is of course tournaments.
Yeah.
Not the be all and end all, but it's one way of getting everyone together.
Yeah.
And with, you know, 10 or 15 different factions, yes, you're going to have champions of each faction,
Yeah.
but they're champions within their own realm. And so one of the main objectives was to say, well, we've got all these great fighters in all our own different factions. One way of really testing the strength and the future potential of Kyokushin is, or its growth up until now,
Yeah.
is to see how they weigh up against each other.
Yeah.
And it was just a very nice, I guess, sort of thought that they had. Well, let's put our pride to one side.
Sure.
Let's forget about saying we have this champion, that champion.
Mm.
Let's actually all get together so that we can sort of say, well, this is how we weigh up against each other. And that was the objective behind it. So in December, they, you know, a lot of work went on. They created a sort of combined tournament. And that was run in January this year up in Tokyo. It was originally going to be, after listening to the press conference, it was originally going to be a Union All Japan Champs.
Okay.
So the Bengokai All Japan Champs. But as they got involved in all of this, they said, well, we've already got the place booked. So, you know, and good on the union for doing this. They said, well, why don't we get all these old branch chiefs and their different groups who want to come together, and we'll make it a combined first, not number 48, number 52, but let's call it the first Masoyama Cup. And that name's been used before, obviously, but a combined one that represents all the different factions that are willing to come together in this old branch chiefs group again. So that was sort of the history behind it all. And then in December, they had a press conference that went for about 40 minutes, and I listened to it yesterday. Everyone was given time to speak. There's different directors on the board. You had, you know, Hasegawa Soshi. So if I just move across here.
Yep.
So in the middle here, let me see my finger. Right. Okay. Yeah, well, it disappears. All right. So in the middle there, you have to your right, I guess, of the Kanku, you have Hasegawa Soshi. On his right hand side, you have Takahashi Shihan, who's part of the union. You have Miwa Shihan next to him with the glasses and the vest. And one of his top students is Okamoto, who was a world champ in '99, I think it was. And he's gone toe-to-toe with Nick in a very sort of dodgy decision that should have really maybe gone Nick's way. And
Yeah.
he's talked about that on many a show.
Yeah.
You have Tabata Shihan to the left of Hasegawa Soshi.
Mm-hmm.
He again is one of the main, captains of the Rengokai. Next to him on the far on my right is Hamai Shihan, who runs his own faction, but again, a very big name in the old days. Behind him is Koi Shihan, Seto Shihan, and of course, the giant himself from Okinawa, Shichinohe Shihan.
Very good.
And I've got a couple of stories of being in a hotel room and having to drink that rocket fuel they make down that way with him and a few others. And maybe that's a topic for another day. The extracurricular training that goes on in hotel rooms before and after a tournament. But they've all come together.
That's cool. Thank you for naming that and giving us an idea on that. That's cool. That's cool. Yeah.
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 So they got together and they ran this tournament. The poster is here.
There you go.
It was on the 15th of January.
Yep.
Quite successful. They had a lot of people. They had an open weight division. They had a senior division. They had a women's division.
Awesome.
And they ran it. They had about 150 participants in it. So it wasn't small by any means. But it's a start. And what they talked about in the press conference was the reasons behind doing it. And one way was to, again, try to not control Kyokushin, but to act as a channel for future sort of cooperative activities, including tournaments, seminars, etc.
Yeah. Collaborative.
Exactly, collaborative. Everyone enjoys their own autonomy, but they get together with the same goal of creating some consistency. And that's basically their main thing. The other thing that maybe some people know or don't is that this old branch chiefs group, or what's called the Shibuchokai, own the trademarks for the Kanku and etc. in Japan. They got that from Sorsai's daughter, and they now manage that. So one other goal they have is to make sure it's not being abused. And not anyone can, use it willy-nilly and sort of, damage the name and, the quality of Kyokushin. So they're, working together to make sure that happens. And that requires a lot of communication.
What a big ask. Yeah. What a big responsibility,
Yeah. And I mean, you've got in Japan, the big one, of course, still to this day is the Matsui faction. You have Midori's faction, Shin Kyokushin. Shin Kyokushin have been working with what is called the JFKO. I think it stands for the Japan Full Contact Karate Organization. They have a lot of tournaments on that bring in different styles. It's an open style tournament. I think an olive branch was sort of put that out that way, but because they're tied up with that different organization, they didn't jump on board. However, there was nothing bad said about that, but recognizing again, which was really a good thing that came from the press conference, that everyone recognized what each group is doing now. But they just wanted to show that they're willing to come together again and work on some good things for the future. So that's basically the history behind it. Yeah.
That's good. That's good to hear. I'll let you have a breather there.
Right.
Really, really good to hear the positive sides of what you're, putting forward. And again, for listeners out there, a crucial part of the Japan Chronicles right here is, the way we interpret here in the Western side of a social media post, for example. And I'll give the example when it came through on my socials. And obviously I'm closely connected with Soshi Hasegawa. His feed comes through, and then I my Shihan and Kyoshi Jimmy, we just interchange on a WhatsApp, and it's just a gesture back and forth. Good to see them all together in some way. However, then we reference it to Shihan Sean, and I kind of exactly what I did. And I said, hey, would love to get more detail. So you've already covered some key points there for many that are listening within the Kyokushin faction here. Understand there is a lot more positives, I feel, coming out of something like this than always hearing the, as I call it, the naysayers and the ones that just want to have a rant and a guess about how it's all factured and it's split. Yeah, that's what it is. What can you do? And we should be moving on. And this is why this is already flowing nicely. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, unless you're here on the ground, it's very hard to sort of gauge what's going on. And there may be a limited amount of information that goes out, but I mean, they've always had the best of intentions, and sure, it's been watered down a bit as it has been worldwide. But if we go back in time and do things differently, sure, a lot of people do that. But the thing is, we're in this current state now. But the great thing is that these people have decided to sort of say, well, we'll put our pride to one side.
Yeah.
It's not a power game anymore. There's no political sort of ambitions there whatsoever. And Hamai Shihan, in the press conference, I think summed this up well when he said that, and I just touched on it before, the fact that, we do have all these factions and groups and their tournaments, and they do attract a lot of numbers and they do create champions. But we've lost that opportunity to see who is perhaps the best amongst them all, because people are in their own very safe, secluded environment. So they want to they want to do this to act as a role model for similar situations overseas. If this can be a template to show that, well, in Japan, all these people can get together and they can do this.
Right. Good point.
Why can't that happen overseas? And it is happening, though. You've got the Kyokushin World Union in Europe.
Yes.
And the Senshi, and Filio Shihan, has just joined that. I think that is the overseas, so that's one example of the same sort of approach where people have said, well, okay, if you get in contact and you want to come and join us for a seminar or for training or for a tournament, we're open to that. For a long time in Japan, it was, well, which faction are you with? No, you can't. You can't come to our seminar or tournament unless you join us. They've put that aside now, and maybe they've learned from overseas. They didn't really allude to that in the press conference.
Sure.
But maybe they've seen some successful examples of what's happening overseas and said, well, let's take that on board. And the Japanese are great at doing this. I mean, Toyota Motor Corporation is the most successful example of taking a foreign idea and putting a Japanese spin on it. They copied the assembly line from Ford.
Okay.
And then they just took it and they blew it right up, and now it is everywhere.
Yeah.
But there's part of the Japanese psyche, right? And there's one thing called wakon yosai, okay? And wakon yosai refers to something that happened during the Meiji Restoration years, where they were suddenly forced open to the world after 200 plus years of seclusion, and they had to play catch up really quickly.
Yeah.
So they send all these groups overseas, and this is the late 1800s, early 20th century sort of time, to play catch up with technology, with education, with medicine, so on and so forth. But they had this mantra, and it is wakon yosai, wa meaning Japanese. The kon is tamashi. Now, if you may have heard this expression before, some of people listening, tamashi refers to spirit. Okay, and we talk about that in training. We train, and then yor is a word refers to Western, and sai is technique or ability or something like that.
Right.
So it's basically taking a Western idea or technique and putting a Japanese spin on it, for lack of a better translation.
Yeah.
That became a mantra. I mean, and this is what I'm seeing here with these kind of efforts.
Yeah. Okay.
they're obviously aware of some of the success that's going on overseas, where people are, working and collaborating together. And they've said, well, as the motherland of Kyokushin, why can't we do that?
You
And
know,
let's do it in a Japanese way.
with that, and the upside of what the other countries are doing, I guess the first thing that comes to my mind is monetary, meaning not monetary from a business and ego level, monetary as in on a government rebate or a incentive program for health and fitness and well-being. They're the words we use here in Australia, obviously. And the governments of these major countries, we don't need to name all of them, but you know where I'm coming from, hopefully, with financially, they have positioned Kyokushin to be, for military self-defense, or for health and, again, for health and well-being, and money, meaning not trying to put the financial term behind it, but the supportive term in allowing the business decisions of a organization to be easily, run without that worry, without the ego of who gets what. And I'm turning behind me as if someone's here, but who gets what? Do you take half, or do you take half? And that slowly has, obviously, I think, very naively watching from afar, smart minds, smart people, starting to use the resources of a government or from a country angle, compared to, unfortunately or fortunately, what Japan have to always face. And there's all these organizations there in Japan. And I'm sure that, think of it this way, listeners: if you were to submit an RFP, is what we call it in sales, like a submission, and there's 4 different Kyokushin organizations all putting in submissions for a X amount of funding, $1 million. And where these other countries are gone, hey, there's money here, we can facilitate it. We've got right-minded people behind it, boards, chairmen, executives, and all these tiers, that they say the onus is on them. The responsibility is on them. Go forward, substantiate, which means prove that this is a something that is beneficial to the community, to society. And that's such a big thing that could you have imagined if Sosai had got, and I'm sure he would have, when he would put together those tournaments and those, he had the support of all his members and the dojo and the branch chiefs, right? Financially, to benefit all of that. One man controlling 10 million, let's use the word as facetiously here, subscribers, in today's society, as a subscription model,
10 million clicks. Yeah, exactly.
And Sosai having to facilitate that on his own now, this. So I may have veered off a little there, but what I was just
No, it's an important
how that is a massive factor of how the Europeans / those organizations over there are succeeding.
Yeah, I think that's how Japan is, and with the formation of this old branch chiefs group, they've established it as an MPO. Okay, so it's not just a group of people that got together in a room and slapped a name on it. They've done it properly. Well, they had to do that, to be able to manage the trademarks and
Legally.
and that, but it's not about the money, and I'm not going to bag any other organization and start to, do dirty digs on, the financial sort of adventures of certain groups. But for them, it's never been about the money. It's
right.
And they obviously have now the ability to tap into those subsidies, support. I mean, at this tournament in January, they had a couple of government politicians as guests giving speeches. Some were from Ministry of Education and Sports, etc. So, it's starting to what they're trying to do is create a good name, and get that support for the benefit of those below them that are going to take Kyokushin into the next 20 or 30 years. And so they're creating that base, and they've got a lot of ideas. This was, I guess, a pilot for them.
Good word.
And I think this coming weekend, the union is having a world champs, their own world champs.
Yes.
Um,
All the best to those
during,
that are competing. There's a lot of post social media interaction over this week for everyone out there. Yeah. Good point.
So, that's going ahead as a union tournament.
Mm-hmm.
However, during this press conference, Tabata Shihan, who's the guy with his hair all slicked back
next to Soshi
next to it, yeah.
left side of Soshi.
Great guy, absolute great guy. And during my time with the union, when I was interpreting for all of these people in the international branch chiefs meeting and stuff, he speaks in very simple terms. He speaks from the heart. And one thing he was talking about as the facilitator of this press conference was that the next step after this, after gauging the success of this combined tournament, is how in the next 2 to 3 years they can possibly develop the opportunity to create a combined world tournament.
Okay.
Which would mean these factions within Japan and their, relative sort of overseas branches, and anyone really, an open tournament where people can come to find a true champion amongst many of the factions. And so that's another one of their objectives. Now, it's not all tournament focused. Naturally, they are one of their, I guess, deeply structured objectives is that they really want to do good by what Sosai has created. They want to maintain that legacy. He has planted the seed, and many trees have sort of grown from it. But they want to continue to build that forest. Just a metaphor that.
Yep.
But it's done in a way where everyone can benefit from it, and that was the message that came through.
Very good.
And, so I'm quite hopeful that this is the start of something really good to come in the future, and it will open the door again for many people that from overseas want to visit Japan, want to take part in seminars, want to go to camps, want to go into a tournament, want to train at different dojos. And this is one thing I wanted to get to as well, is that being an independent here, because I'm, part of my organization in New Zealand. So within Japan, I'm a bit of a floater, and I enjoy that relationship. I have a good relationship with these people. You could have someone from your dojo, for example, who, let's say they want to train it, and I've talked about this person before, Yui Shihan's dojo, okay? Now, he's part of the Hamai group, but it's a phone call away where I say, okay, Sensei Pat has this student coming.
Yeah.
He's going to be in your area. Would it be okay if he, turned up for a training session? And if you follow the etiquette and you do it properly, people are 9.9 times out of 10 going to say, sure, just let me know when they're coming.
Yep.
And I see my sort of position here in Japan now as this organization and these events grow is to act as a bit of a facilitator in that way.
Yeah.
Perhaps, with the language barrier.
Yeah.
But and also just using a bit of cultural intelligence, like knowing who to approach and how to approach them.
Yeah.
And if it's done in the right way, and I can act as that buffer between those people, then hopefully, the doors are already open, but they're open a lot more smoothly,
nice way.
And people can just walk in and they'll feel welcome, and they can train their guts out. That's and show the appropriate amount of respect and gratitude and what have you.
No doubt.
Which we would do no matter what dojo we went to around the world. It's a privilege. It's not a right. It's a privilege to be able to go and train in someone else's dojo.
Right.
And to show that respect and to get as much from that experience as possible is something I can see happening more as people sort of work their way through the sort of boundaries they want to, perhaps
explore,
stretch out. Yeah, exactly. Or get rid of. At the same time, maintaining the autonomy that they perhaps want to maintain, but doing it in a way that's mutually beneficial for everyone involved.
Well said. Well said. There you have it. That's spot on. That's really cool to hear. Really, really positive. Puts a smile on my face. I'm sure it'll put a smile on many others as well, for those long termers. But for the like I was sharing with you earlier, the novices, respectfully, the ones that are just starting or just wanted to get their understanding of the as the ugly word I hate using in Kyokushin, and I'm about to throw up saying it, the political side of it. I can't. It's not a word in my vocabulary, or however I've just said it, but that to me does not, like, as they say, push it aside. Listen to the good, listen to the positives. If you hear, like Shihan Sean has just offered his time again to us and researched it in regards to watching the press conference on all of our behalf now, you hear all good. It's all good, all positive, and continue to hear that. Makes a massive difference compared to the energy, I call it, of the maybe I read it this way, I saw it this way, maybe it was this, and it's like, you don't know, so don't say, again, try not to say too much, because the novices and the ones that are beginning, I feel, should be hearing this in understanding all good happening around Kyokushin, and no doubt and in the motherland there as well. It's awesome to hear it from your perspective, Shihan.
Yeah, and I mean it's something that hasn't come about just overnight.
No.
This has been basically 4 years in the workings. That 4 years ago they all started to reestablish contact amongst each other. There was the trademarks, there was the court case for that, and they started to plan carefully. Okay, once they experienced one success, they said, okay, what's our next objective? Okay, well, how do we add value to what Sosai's created?
Good stuff.
How do we maintain the quality that he demanded from all of them? And being the old original branch chiefs, that's something they all hold very close to their hearts.
Yeah.
And they want to pass that on to the next generation. So they're getting a group of like-minded people together to say, okay, what do we share in common? What we share in common is that we've all been taught by Sosai. We know what he wanted. We know what he wanted to maintain. We knew his vision for expanding and improving upon what he created. And they see that as their mission now.
That's it.
Pass on to the future leaders. And they talked about that a lot in the press conference too, is that they want to nurture that next group of their front lines. But the front lines, it's like any high performance organization, you've got to speak the same language. And we're speaking the language of Kyokushin. And so they want to make sure that the language is consistent. There's no political, like you said before, it's a horrible word, but there's no political power play. No one has ultimate power. It's consensus building from the start to the end.
Nice. Yeah.
And so in that regard, I think there's a lot to good to come from it. And
Great.
it's a positive move that hopefully will just continue to grow. And like I said before, hopefully in the next 2 to 3 years, they'll build it to a stage where they can actually have a fully fledged world tournament.
How good. And in summary, and again in appreciation of time here, in summary, for those listeners out there, and for all of us, even me, to continue that positive language, that positive energy of what Kyokushin is about. It's the massive reason of what I built this platform to be. If I dare you to go look into any of the 100 episodes that I've done and find this negative rant shit that goes on, I can't stand it. It's not a thing. So it's up to people like us that are listening, that are guests of ours in a way, to share it and reinforce it, and continue to ask the luxury that we have here with Shihan Sean, the odd question that you may not be across, rather than broadcasting shit. So let's continue to spread that this episode more so around, and just gesture what has occurred, and we've heard it from Shihan Sean. We appreciate it again.
Great. And I mean, just to end, perhaps this is and I haven't talked about this with you yet, so I mean, I'm just speaking off cuff here, but perhaps it's a good time to maybe try and get someone on to interview
Yeah.
You know, one idea I had was to, because I know him quite well, is Yui Shihan.
Mm-hmm.
But again, you know, before we can secure
Mm.
certain Japanese instructors, etc., it would be really good to hear from the listeners.
Yep.
You know, if there was a Japanese Shihan or sensei on the program, what kind of questions would you like to ask about Japan? You know, that if
Sure.
we can get, you know, 3 or 4 or 5 questions. Again,
Yep.
we don't want to create an episode that goes for an hour and a half or
Yeah.
2 hours.
Yeah.
We want to keep it to, you know, very digestible sort of
S-
amount of time.
Spot on.
If you've got specific questions, yes, for those listening, you know, and it's
Crucial.
great to see we're getting, you know, 300 plus views. That means
Yep.
some people are taking the time to actually listen. The comments are great.
Yep.
We feed off that. But if you've got any specific questions, really like to sort of
Yeah.
add a call for questions there so that that can help us sort of create an interview that answers something that people are,
Yeah.
you know, curious about, rather than us controlling the interview, if you like.
Correct. The word I think of is give it some substance, guys and girls that are listening. Give it some substance behind it, and that allows put yourself in Shihan Sean's shoes, for example, approaching one of the branch chiefs slash students of Sosai, and him saying, "Look, we want to interview you," and then them going, "Yeah, what for? What's going on? What are we
Yeah,
talking
yeah,
about?"
yeah.
So we got to put yourself in his shoes for a moment there. But Shihan, that's great. Good point again. But you know, again, appreciating your time. You've been away, and you took the time again for us. So, as we've shown with the Japan Chronicles, we're doing a 2 to 3 week buffer here. It gives time. It gives everyone a little bit of the add-on that I have with the Strongest Karate episode. So, again, it's going smoothly. We're into April, for crying out loud, Shian. It's just, you know, time's flying.
Hard to believe, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. So, Shian, if you got anything else to add, the floor's yours for a sec before I sign off. Yeah.
No, just the usual. Thanks to all those
Cool.
that take time to have a listen. Hope you got something out of this as well. But again, your ideas become our ideas as
Yeah.
well. It's as much everyone's channel or, you know,
Platform.
platform as well. So if there's certain things you'd like us to sort of, you know, delve into, you know, I'm able to do the research here or tap into what, you know, knowledge I have
Awesome.
of goings on here. So again, in the comments, feel free to put down any ideas. You know, any idea is a good idea in my books. And yeah, again, thanks for listening.
Awesome. Thanks, Shian. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate your time. I trust you got something out of it. Subscribe, like, all that jargon. I hate it, but it supports the channel, supports us in that way. You know, keep training hard, keep making Kyokushin the strongest karate. A big us to you all. Take care. I'll see you. I'm going to do the stamina episode for the strongest karate coming up. Also, everyone. Thanks, Shihan Sean. Appreciate your time as always.
Cheers.